The calendar has been a hotly debated topic as of late. I can only imagine it is due to our hearts desiring to serve Yahweh correctly. The calendar series we are embarking on are not made to prove anyone wrong or shame any other teachings on the subject, but to simply put forth my understanding at this time, as many of you have asked where I stand. We truly live in amazing times where thousands are coming back to the Most High with a zeal that hasn't been seen in centuries. And to be honest, whatever calendar you're on, I love you as a brother and sister because you have a desire to keep His ways, as do I. Welcome back, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the Parable of the Vineyard YouTube live stream series of the calendar study. And this today we're going to be talking about evening to evening or morning to morning. And I started out with the first scripture being shown is that passage in Hebrews that we're called to follow peace with all men. And it says, without such, no man shall see Yahweh. So before we embark on this, I know that this is a very hotly debated, highly contentious topic. So in no way, shape, or form am I bringing this study to stir up anybody or make anybody upset. That's not my goal. But after many years of looking at this subject and looking at it from both perspectives, because I'll admit right off the gate that I can understand both sides. I really can. I've studied the evening to evening pretty well. I've studied the morning to morning, and I see that there is evidence that leans to both. And so for whatever side you hold to, I understand where you are. I really do. But with that being said, I did feel led to embark on this series, this calendar series of studies, regardless of how angry it makes people. We still need to stand for what's true, and that's what I'm doing today, at least from the best that I understand it at this point. So before we begin, let's do a quick prayer, and we'll get forward with the study. Heavenly Father, Yahweh Most High, we come before you in Yahushua's name, and we just bless you and thank you for leaving us our word for us to study and understand your ways. And we pray that as we read your word, you would open our eyes and our ears so that you may give us understanding, because we know that wisdom truly comes from you, and the beginning of all that comes from the fear of you. We love you and bless you in Yahushua's mighty name. Amen. So that's where a lot of us are, is we have a fear for the Most High, and we want to just do it the right way. And I get it. And, this, by the way, what we're going to be doing today is reading from an article. I know I've heard from a lot of you that this is a good way you prefer it, to leave an article so that after hearing the study or listening to the study, you can go back for yourself at your own pace and look at all the evidence for yourself. So I'll be making sure to leave a link in the description box and in a pinned comment so that you can read this article if you desire to do so. So in any case, with that being said, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and I know a lot of brothers and sisters in this community, and I've seen they're all over the place. I have some great friends that are on evening to evening, and some great friends that are morning to morning, and again, I see both sides. I even know some brothers that have such a regard for the Most High and such a fear of doing it the wrong way that they kind of do it both. They do it like Friday evening to Sunday morning. They're like 36 hours just to make sure I don't want to transgress them. I'm not sure. I see it both ways. I love that. I think that just shows us true fear for the Most High. But with that being said, let's move forward with the study. So again, we're going to be reading this. This is the calendar series. This is part 2 of a unknown length of series that we'll be doing. And this part is specifically discussing the current debate between evening to evening or morning to morning, starting a day. But ultimately, what's the most important is how we keep the Sabbath day. And really all the feasts at that point. So evening to evening or sunrise to sunrise is where we're at, or what we're studying today. So I'm just going to read it for you, and I'll have some commentary alongside of it. So, if you join us in part 1 of our calendar series, Calculating the Feast Days, then you'll know that my utmost sentiments regarding the calendar in general. I am overjoyed that a group of people are coming back to Yahweh with a desire to keep his ways correctly. Regardless of whether or not we end up agreeing on this specific topic does not sway my care or love for you as a brother or sister. I really mean that. I really do. This isn't just like, In fact, I think we are seeing way too much of the opposite in this walk. Where's the love, neighbor? Seriously, imagine everything from his perspective, not from ours. It's hard to put yourself in his shoes for a moment, but just try to for a second. He wakes up a remnant, gives them some wisdom, and they thrash each other over disagreements on interpretations. Let's be real for a moment. If two people can read the scriptures cover to cover, and one concludes that we don't have to keep the commandments, and the other does the same and concludes we do keep the commandments, how much more will there be differing opinions on the calendar? Let's have some love for each other, lest we become Pharisees and Sadducees all over again. I know, hashing out the scriptures and sharpening each other isn't always puppy dogs and ice cream, but we can still have respect and love as we do so. Also, breaking fellowship over these types of topics have become all too common. I know very well. It's time we took hold of these commands Master Yahushua left us. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that you love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, and we know that part of love is saying hard things to people that you don't necessarily want to say, or talking about topics that you don't necessarily want to talk about because they just in general create strife and debate. And that's something that Yah's been working on me. I've kind of stayed away from the calendar because it causes contention, but that's not right. That's not right for me to do so. That's cowardly. And so that's something that he's rended my heart. That's not a good word. He's fixed me. And this is something that it was time to take a true look at this and to stand up for what I believe he's showing me, at least. So, with this established, it's time we took a look at the current debate whether a day is calculated from evening to evening, so sunset to sunset, or morning to morning, sunrise to sunrise. I will admit, like I did from the outset, there is evidence for both views, and I can see both perspectives. I really can. And I looked at both from a really open mind because I didn't want to just stay where I was at to be comfortable. I really wanted to know what the truth is, and so I really took an honest look at this. So regardless, one has to be correct, and it was my mission to put this to rest. If you're firm in your position and will not re-examine information, this study may not be for you. If you're willing to put your current understanding to the test, or if you are on the fence, or even if you have no inclination either way and just want the truth, the study will be for your edification. So let's start at Bereshit, the beginning. I think a great place to start is the creation account, as we will get some clues to inspect. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Ruach Elohim moved upon the face of the waters, and Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. And that's Genesis 1:1-3. Understanding what really took place on day one is an amazing study in and of itself, but for another time, because that could be a 2-hour study in itself. So while the sun and moon were not created until day 4, we can at least agree that first there was darkness, then there was light. Regardless of how you want to shape the creation account of what he did, what he didn't do, darkness was first, then light came. This sets a pattern one could possibly follow to understand a scriptural day. Darkness first, then light. Here are some other patterns to consider. A child born into the world is first in darkness in its mother's womb, then it is born into the light. A seed planted won't grow unless it first starts under the soil in darkness, then springs forth into the light. For most of us, our walk with Yah followed this pattern. We walked in darkness, then we were led into his light, his Torah. Peter mentions this in his first letter. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. 1 Peter 2-9. So while Genesis 1:1-3 and the examples we showed afterwards are not conclusive evidence, it's at least a starting point and something to consider. If the day were to begin at sunrise, we would be starting in the light and ending in darkness, sort of the opposite of the pattern shown at the creation and in the basic principles of life mentioned just a moment ago. While reading some of the articles and watching videos that favor a sunrise to sunrise argument, I had seen the notion that someone who starts a day at the evening is likened to walking in darkness or embracing darkness. They also liken those who observe a sunrise to sunrise as being the sons of light. We must realize that Yahweh created the light and the darkness. Why would we mock his creation, right? So basically they're saying like darkness is evil, the night is horrible. We shouldn't follow that. We should only follow the daytime, the light, those kind of things. So I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, Yahweh, do all these things. Isaiah 45:7. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion round about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. Psalm 18:9 and 11. One may say we are called to walk in the light and not in darkness. Then concluding this must mean a day starts at sunrise. Here's the verse. Yahusha answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he sees the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbles, because there is no light in him." John 11:9 through 10. We know that Messiah spoke in parable form on many occasions. This is no exception. He's not talking about when the day begins or even detesting the night hours of a day, but teaching about walking in the light, which is the Torah. But the path of the just is as the shining light that shines more and more unto the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble. Proverbs 4:18 through 19. To the Torah and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them, right? Because there's no Torah in them. For the commandment is a lamp, and the Torah is light. This is Proverbs 6:23. There's much more to be said, but this should be enough for argument's sake. I brought this up as while inspecting the sunrise to sunrise evidence, it was implied in some cases that those who observe an evening to evening calendar are sons of darkness, while morning to morning were the sons of light. This I don't agree with at all. Yahusha was teaching his disciples to walk in the Torah, the light, and not in darkness, which is lawless, the opposite, lawlessness or Torahlessness. Let's go to the first day of Genesis chapter 1. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness, and Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and evening and morning were the first day. So it's Genesis 1:4 through 5. So it is interesting that both sides of the debate use these verses to justify their point. It becomes a game of linguistical gymnastics, but nevertheless, let's take a look. Reading the Hebrew interlinear itself, the translation into English is correct. So here's the interlinear. It says, "And there was evening, and there was morning the first day." So we'll break this down a little bit further in just a second. So following the pattern we first saw in the creation account, darkness first, then light. No lengthy explanations needed. Some would say, "And then there was evening and morning," implying that something came before the evening. This just doesn't happen in the Hebrew. And they get this because some of the translations actually say that, "And then there was evening, and then there was morning." But the Hebrew doesn't say that. So let's take a look. So this is what it would look like for "and then there was." So just in case I'm going a little fast, which I have a lot to cover, so if I do go fast, I apologize. But again, you can always go back to the article and read it at your pace. So what I'm getting ready to show you here is the Hebrew just simply says, "And there was evening, and there was morning." It does not say, "And then there was evening, and then there was morning." So if the Hebrew were to say, "And then there was," it would be ve'az haya. So this says ve'az haya, and then there was. So the Hebrew would read ve'az haya, whereas it simply is v'chaya, which is two different. Ve'az chaya and v'chaya are two different things. So v'chaya, right here, v'chaya, and there was. So the translators got this one right. So by someone saying, "and then there was evening, and then there was light," they're adding to the Hebrew. The Hebrew does not say that because, again, it would say ve'az haya, but it doesn't say that. It just says v'chaya. It's two different things. So remember, so this is yeah, so this is, and there was evening. So before we continue, we need to establish one important matter. In the Hebrew, yom can be defined as the daylight hours of, I wrote this wrong. In the Hebrew, yom can be defined as the daylight hours of a 24-hour day, so just the light portion. So yom could be the hours of the sun, which, it depends on what season you're in, but let's just call it 12 hours. Let's say we're at the equinox and you got half day and half night. So yom can be defined as that 12-hour period of a 24-hour day. Yom can also be used to define or express an entire day or a 24-hour period, so consisting of night and day. This, I believe, is where much of the confusion is rooted, but we will expound on this a little bit later. So I just wanted to set the precedence that yom can mean daylight hours or a 24-hour period, either one. So let's go to the feast days. The feast days of Yahweh, in my opinion, puts the whole argument to rest. This is where my foundation is as to where I am rooted in this understanding of either evening to evening or morning to morning. So this is the concrete foundation that I am standing on, and I'll explain where I'm at. So Yahweh is not an author of confusion, but of clear and concise instructions. Prophecy, parables, those may be hidden or sometimes hard to understand. Conversely, in my experience, when it comes to keeping his commandments, they are straightforward. After all, if they weren't easy to understand, how can he hold us accountable? It's got to be simple for anyone, even the layman, to understand. Hey, I got to keep Sabbath. Hey, I got to do this. I got to do that. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be so hard to understand that the simple person couldn't understand what to do. So, again, if it wasn't easy to understand, how can he hold us accountable? This is how I believe he has treated the subject of counting a day, and ultimately how and when to keep his festivals and weekly Sabbaths, which is the ultimate goal of this study. The ultimate goal of this study is to figure out if we need to be keeping all the feast days and his Sabbaths evening to evening or morning to morning. Plus, we need to know how to count the days if we want to get it right on the same day as well. So this is why it's part of the calendar series that we're doing. So let's look at Passover and unleavened bread, which is really just one big festival. It is counted as 2 feast days, but Passover is part of unleavened bread. The Passover meal is the first eating of unleavened bread. So these are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at evening is Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work there. And that's Leviticus 23, 4-7. So here we see 2 important facts we must not overlook. Yahweh commanded his feast days to be kept starting at evening, or at least this feast day starting at evening. So we'll go with that, right? Forgive me for saying his feast days, all of them, right? So I'm not implying that yet. So he told us here to keep this feast, which is the first one of the year, at evening. What you will never find is one single command to keep any feast day or Sabbath starting at morning. You won't find it. You won't find a command. Again, reviewing the evidence for morning to morning, there's a ton of scriptures that kind of allude to the next day starting at morning, and we'll get to some of those. In fairness, we need to look at some of those. I really do. But what we're looking at now is straightforward Torah commandments. Do this. This is how it's done. Not like, well, because this verse said this and this, then that makes me think it's morning to morning. This is straightforward commandment. So bear with me. This is not to be taken lightly. So what we're talking about is there's not one command to keep anything morning to morning. This is not to be taken lightly, as he is a consistent Elohim and changes not. Also, we see that the feast of unleavened bread is to be kept 7 days. This isn't 7 12-hour daylight periods. This is 7 24-hour periods. So 7 full days, a whole week. So when he gives us the instructions of how to keep the 7 days, we can be assured that this is how we count 7 days. I'll explain more in a moment. 7 days you shall eat matzah, that's unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Yasharel. And in the first day there shall be a holy assembly, and in the 7th day there shall be a holy assembly to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat. That only may be done of you. And you shall guard the feast of matzah, unleavened bread. For in the self-same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore shall ye guard this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, ye shall eat matzah until the 21st day of the month at evening. So he said, you're going to eat unleavened bread from evening on the 14th to evening at the 21st. So did you catch that? Yahweh just told us how to count 7 days. Think about it. Here's the scripture again. 7 days you shall eat matzah. And in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat matzah until the 21st day of the month at evening. Yahweh just instructed us in his Torah that 7 days are counted from the 14th day at evening to the 21st day at evening. This cannot be understated. If you were hoping for a set of verses or a verse that just makes the whole argument simple to understand or an aha moment, it's right there. I'm telling you, it's right there. It's been right there the whole time for us. Let me just break it down a little bit slowly. So Yahweh said to eat unleavened bread 7 days, 7 full 24-hour periods. And he just told you what 7 full days or 7 24-hour periods looks like. It's from the 14th month at evening to the 21st day at evening. That's 7 days, period. I could literally end the study right here, but there's a ton more to go over. But again, that if you're wondering where my sure footing is, like if this is a house built with footers and with a concrete slab, that's the concrete slab I'm standing on right now, because Yahweh just told you plain as day what 7 days looks like and how it's counted. Let's look at a visual. Sometimes visuals, they say a picture is worth, 1,000 words. Let's look at the visual of this. So again, 7 days of unleavened bread. So remember the commandment, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. So that's Exodus 12, 15, and 18. So here we go. So this is looking at it. We're going to look at it from a morning to morning perspective and an evening to evening perspective, both with visual charts. Okay, so this is a perspective of, this is the 14th day, so nighttime then daytime, 15th nighttime then daytime, so it goes all the way through. So what we read was the 14th day at evening, and the evening hours are the wee little hours that separates the daytime and the nighttime. It's a separation. We'll talk more about that in a second. So he's telling us to keep the feast of unleavened bread from evening on the 14th to the evening on the 21st. And you'll see that's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. Easy, right? So it starts on the 14th at evening. It ends on the 21st at evening. No issues. So 7 days are shown to you from evening to evening. If there was no other evidence, this alone would be enough to stand in court. It would. But there's more to cover. When is the Passover meal to be eaten, and when does unleavened bread start? And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And this is talking about the Passover lamb. So it told you to take it out, select it on the 10th day, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole multitude of the assembly of Yasharel shall kill it in the evening, and they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper door posts of the houses wherein they shall eat it, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and matzah, unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs shall they eat it. Exodus 12, 6-8. So, order of events. You take the Passover lamb on the 10th. You keep it until the 14th at evening, right before it gets dark. You kill it. You put the blood on the doorposts, and you eat it that night. You don't wait for some other day. You eat it that very night. Otherwise, the meat goes bad and, all that kind of stuff. So, the Passover meal is to be eaten at night. This also begins the feast of unleavened bread, as the meal commands it to be eaten. As the meal commands it, which is unleavened bread, to be eaten alongside the lamb. Unleavened bread starts on the 15th day of the first month. In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Leviticus 23, 5 through 6. So considering the Passover meal is to be eaten at night, and that meal is commanded to be eaten with unleavened bread, he just told us when the date changes from the 14th to the 15th at night during the Passover meal. If you didn't catch that, trust me, we'll go over it in just a second. Which is also, so he told us when the date changes from the 14th to the 15th at night during the Passover meal, which is also the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The book of Jubilees makes it clearer for us to see. Remember the commandment which Yahweh commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th of the first month, that you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of the 15th from the time of the setting of the sun. That's Jubilees 49:1. So you're killing the Passover here, and you're eating it here. And Jubilees just told you you're eating it on the night of the 15th. Just told you that the date changed from evening on the 14th to night as the 15th. So Jubilees just conformed what the Torah already instructed. The date changed after sunset and when evening came. Now, let's take a look at the visual aid we used for the 7 days of unleavened bread, but from a sunrise to sunrise perspective. So here we have it flipped. So now we have, let's say this would be morning, evening, night. So this is a 24-hour day right here. So this is the 14th, this is the 15th, 16th, so on and so forth, all the way. So here, if from a morning to morning perspective, so again, on the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread, and the 1 and 20th until the 1 and 20th day, so the 21st day of the month at evening. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So the commandment is to start eating unleavened bread at the 14th at evening. Okay, so again, if day is first, then night. So here's the evening on the 14th, right? There's a problem here, and I'll explain it to you. So you can still count 7 days. That's no problem. You can still count 7 days, right? But we have a problem now. The command is to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Exodus 12:18 tells us to begin eating unleavened bread at evening on the 14th, but then Leviticus 23:6 tells us the festival of unleavened bread begins on the 15th. We have roughly a 12-hour gap discrepancy with the sunrise theory circled in red above. So here again, what I'm telling you, this is what I'm trying to tell you. So you're supposed to eat unleavened bread here. So the Feast of Passover starts unleavened bread. So we're eating that here. If sunrise to sunrise is correct, we're eating that here. But if the date doesn't change until the morning here, so if the 15th doesn't start here, you have a 12-hour gap issue between what the commandment is telling you. Because if morning to morning were true, this wouldn't make sense because it's contradicting one another. It's telling you to eat unleavened bread for 7 days starting here, but then it's telling you that unleavened bread doesn't start here. It just doesn't work. So remember what Jubilee said. Remember the commandment which Yahweh commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th day of the first month, that you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of the 15th from the time of the setting of the sun. So per the sunrise theory, they would have to wait 24 hours after killing the Passover lamb on the evening of the 14th and eat it on the evening of the 15th. This is impossible, as the commandment also tells us to burn any remains before it is morning. So what I'm trying to say is, if you kill the Passover here, and then you're not supposed to eat it until the evening of the 15th, and so now we're talking about here, you've got a 24-hour gap between when you kill it and when you eat it, if the 15th started here in the morning, which I'm here to say I don't believe it does. Remember, the remains were to be burnt in the morning, so if we're killing it here in the evening, all the remains are to be burnt by here, and then there's no way you could eat it on the 15th of the first month. This is that which Yahweh commanded thee, that thou shouldst observe it between the evenings. This is the Passover. And that it is not permissible to slay it during any period of the light, but during the period bordering on the evening, and let them eat it at the time of the evening until the third part of the night, and whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night and onwards, let them burn it with fire. And that's Jubilees 49:11 through 12. So the truth is The 15th day of the month began at night. After the sunset, the evening was over. So again, just to go back to the correct chart, the correct visual, they killed it here. So nighttime, then daytime. So evening before it changes over the 15th. They are killing it here on the 14th and eating it by night on the 15th and burning the remains before the morning came on the 15th. There's more to this, much more. So now let's look at them, the Israelites leaving Egypt. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this self same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. So this self same day is talking about in the same 24-hour period. It's not talking about a period of light, because as we'll find out here shortly, they came out by night. So if he's talking about on self same day, it's contradicting itself. So he's talking about from the self same 24-hour period, I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe it in your generations by an ordinance forever. So we know already that the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th day of the first month, and Exodus 12:17 just stated that they left Egypt the same day, the same 24-hour period. Even putting aside the evidence the word just showed us a moment ago, consider this. The timeline leaving Egypt is as follows. They kill the Passover at evening on the 14th day of the first month. They eat the Passover that night after the sun went down. The firstborn are slain at night, the same night. Pharaoh commands that they leave hastily that same night. They leave at night. Deuteronomy 16:1 we'll read in just a second. This would confirm that the date changed from the 14th of the first to the 15th that night after the sunset ended. Take a look. I'll explain. And it came to pass that at midnight Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And let's pause. Remember, this happened that same night that they killed the Passover lamb and put the blood over the doorpost to protect their household from the slayer to come in and to kill their firstborn son. It wasn't they killed it that night and that blood remained 24 hours until the next night. No, it was the same night. So, and it came to pass that at midnight Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moshe and Aaron by night, so it's still night, and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve Yahweh as you have said also. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. So everything was night, night, night. Firstborn was slain at midnight. Pharaoh rose up at midnight. He called for Moshe and Aaron by midnight and had them leave by night. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh your Elohim. For in the month of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you forth out of Egypt by night. He didn't bring them out in daytime. I want to explain why this is important. So with this evidence, it should be easy to conclude that the Israelites left Egypt that same night when they were eating the Passover, which was the 15th day of the month per the Scriptures. By this we know that a day changes at nighttime after the sun goes down. Remember, and you shall observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we've already confirmed is on the 15th day of the first month. I'll read it one more time for you in a second. You shall observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, for in this self same day, which we know he brought them out by night, so the same 24-hour period have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. Exodus 12:17. Remember, in the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Unto Yahweh 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So just to recap, unleavened bread is the 15th day of the first month. The same day at night they left Egypt. They didn't wait a 24-hour period before being cast out. They killed the Passover before sunset on the 14th. The blood on the doorpost. The blood on the door protected them that night, and they were sent in haste the same night, the 15th. Now let's take a look at the Day of Atonement. Once again, we find ourselves on a subtopic within this debate that both sides use for their argument. I will simply share how I understand the Day of Atonement at this time. Here's the commandment. Also, on the 10th day of this 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and you shall afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month at even, from even unto even shall you celebrate your Sabbath. So here, this is actually a really important passage. So this is Leviticus 23, 27, and 32. So before we dissect this, here is a second witness to celebrating something Yahweh commanded in a manner of evening to evening. Straight up, he says, you're going to celebrate this Sabbath evening to evening. Again, not once do we see any command to celebrate anything from morning to morning. Not even a whisper, right? Nothing. Let's see what this would look like, as some may say that because it is commanded from the 9th day at evening, that there's no way this would work from a perspective that the day is calculated from evening to evening. Sometimes a visual is very helpful, and I needed it myself, because when people were explaining it, kind of debunking the evening to evening theory, I was like, okay, that is kind of different. Maybe you're onto something. Then I put it on a visual here, and it made a whole lot of sense. So, Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls. From the 9th day of the month, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbaths. Leviticus 23:32. So, here's an evening to morning perspective, or nighttime to daytime perspective, which is where I'm at, as you can probably tell by now. So, here's the 9th day. So, nighttime, then morning, and here's those wee little hours of evening, right there, right before it becomes nighttime. So he's telling you to celebrate on the 9th day at evening, from evening to evening. So when you're celebrating it from here to here, that's the 10th day. I'll explain. Considering the evening is generally understood as the time from the sun setting to twilight, dark sky, it makes complete sense that he would command our Sabbath observance to start at that time, which is the changing of the day. If we start at nighttime, we may start late. So if you're starting already when it's nighttime, you could start 30 minutes late, 20 minutes late, whatever. But if we start at the time he designated, we will be on time for his appointment, which is what the feast days are after all. His feast days are appointed times. There are appointments with him and us. It's like, we've got an appointment with him. Do you want to be late? Side note, I was in the military. And you don't even need to be in the military to understand this. If you work for anybody, they want you to be on time, right? Bosses really like it if you're like 15 minutes early. In the military, if we were leaving somewhere, let's say we're going to go to the field or go to the range for the day, the shooting range, and we're leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning. Actually, we never left for anything at 8 o'clock in the morning. So let's say we're leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning. You weren't ready, and you didn't get in your spot at 6 in the morning. You were there at like 5:30 or like 5:45. So you're there early before it starts. That's just good habits. How much more for some of the most important things we may do in our life, which is to keep his commanded times. If that evening is that breaking point between a day, and so the day starts at evening, he would want us to start it on time. So I can go on that for a while, but I don't need to. So if the Day of Atonement is celebrated from the evening of the 9th, which is just minutes away from the nighttime, which starts the 10th, to the evening of the 10th, then the Sabbath is properly observed on the 10th day, the 24-hour period of the 10th day, as it is commanded. Let us not forget, this is exactly the same pattern for the week of unleavened bread. It was commanded to be celebrated on the 15th day of the month. So Leviticus 23, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must keep unleavened bread. But let's not forget, it was to begin at the 14th at evening. And the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. So it's the same pattern. It's the same thing. He's like, be 30 minutes early to my feast. That's pretty much what he's saying. So again, from an evening to evening perspective, you are celebrating the entire 24-hour period on the 10th day of the month. Simple as that. Yahweh is an Elohim of order. Both feasts are operated in the same way. So Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Day of Atonement. With these two witnesses, I would conclude that all feasts, including the weekly Sabbath, are to be observed in an evening-to-evening fashion, to which it is also the changing of the calendar day. While testing the sunrise-to-sunrise teachings, they would imply that these feasts alone are commanded evening to evening because they were different, as in it was universally understood that morning to morning was for everything else. I have an issue with that. So herein lies the problem. You can't find any commandment anywhere to keep any holy day from morning to morning. Nothing. Zip. Nothing. I have a problem with that. Yahweh is very clear and very concise on what he does. So nothing, not even one command, not even a whisper. What we do have are two witnesses in favor of evening to evening, and I believe Yahweh gave us the example to follow for all. Let us take a look at the Day of Atonement from a sunrise to sunrise perspective. So now I flipped it. So now you have daytime, then nighttime, daytime, then nighttime. So this is okay. So, again, same thing. Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls from the ninth day of the month, from evening to evening. You shall keep your Sabbaths. Leviticus 23:32. So here you have the ninth day. The ninth day, and from a sunrise to sunrise perspective, you have the ninth day, you have the light, and then the darkness, right? So this is the ninth day. This is the 10th day. So if we go the ninth day at evening to the 10th day at evening, now you got a problem. Now you're celebrating half on the ninth and half on the 10th. It wouldn't hold true to celebrating on the 10th day of the month. Let me explain. So if morning to morning is correct, then half of this holy day is celebrated on the ninth and half on the 10th. That's just really it. So he would say, it would be more proper and more clear for him to say, if morning to morning was generally understood and that was just it, he would say half of this feast day you'll celebrate on the ninth day of the month, from evening time to evening time on the 10th day of the month. So half of the day is on half of this 24-hour period. When you say day, you can get confused because day can either mean a 24-hour period or a 12-hour period of light. So if he's telling us to celebrate it on the 10th day of the month, well then, from a morning to morning perspective, you're only celebrating during half of the 10th day, half of the 24-hour period of the month on the 10th day, if that makes sense. So again, here's the morning to morning perspective and what it looks like. Here's the evening to evening perspective and what it looks like. Whereas here, the entire 10th day of the month, you're celebrating the Day of Atonement, making it true that on the 10th day of the month is the Day of Atonement. So one last note on the feast days before we move on. The Septuagint renders this translation to the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls from the ninth day of the month. From evening to evening shall you keep your Sabbaths, plural. So while this is just an interpretation, I get it. I think they got it right with making Sabbaths plural. Again, considering no evidence exists for the contrary. And when I say evidence, again, there is evidence that makes it look like the next 24-hour day or next calendar day starts at the morning. I get that. I really do. I really see that. I do. And I'm going to go over some of those. But again, what I'm standing here as on concrete ground is what the Torah just told us. Again, going back to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, he told you how to count 7 days. It started from the evening of the 14th to the evening of the 21st. He said that that's 7 days. If morning were to be correct, then he would have said from morning to morning is 7 days. But that's just not that's not what he said. So some verses to consider. And these really are ancillary. Really, my case for evening to evening was just put forth for you. There's actually a little more to go. I think we're halfway through. My case was just put forth. What I feel is the solid ground is what I just shared with you with the feast days and the two witnesses that those provide. Now we're going to go over some other things. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut and charged that they should not be opened until after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates that there should be no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So here's where things get subjective, because you can actually look at this from both perspectives. You can say, from where I stand, you can say, hey, it began to be dark. So this is evening before nighttime started, because my understanding that nighttime starts the next day. And so as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, so this is the evening hours before Sabbath, right? This is sundown. So like this picture is a good example, right? This is beginning to be dark, but the sun is not down yet. So nighttime hasn't started, so the next day hasn't started. So from my perspective, he shut the gates before the Sabbath as the sunset was happening. But this is subjective because the sunrise to sunrise crowd can say the same thing. They're like, well, they shut it at nighttime because it's nighttime, but still the Sabbath starts in the morning. So I get that. I do. So this verse is certainly not conclusive on its own, but it is worthy of considering alongside the rest of the evidence. The next set of verses pertain to being clean per the Torah. You'll see that every time that one is deemed clean, it happens at evening, not morning. And the clean person shall sprinkle upon the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And upon the 7th day he shall purify and wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and shall be clean at even or evening. Numbers 19:19. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness that chanceth him by night, then he shall go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp, but it shall be when evening comes on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. So he's clean at evening, at sunset, or when the sun has set. Deuteronomy 23:10 through 11. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe and to Aharon, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When any man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his flesh he is unclean, and this shall be his uncleanness in his issue. Whether his flesh run with his issue, or his flesh be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanness. Every bed whereon he lies that hath the issue is unclean, and everything whereon upon he sits shall be unclean. And whosoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And he that sits on anything whereon he sat, that hath the issue, shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And he that touches the flesh of him that hath the issue shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And if he that hath the issue spit upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And what saddle soever he rides upon that hath the issue shall be unclean, and whosoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until the even. And he that bears any of those things shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And whomsoever he touches that hath the issue and hath not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. That's Leviticus 15:1 through 11. So there's actually a lot more, but I stopped there. I probably could have stopped at the second one, so sorry. If you continue to read Leviticus 15, you'll find many more examples of being clean at evening. While the scriptures don't outright say they are clean because the new day starts, it almost seems to imply this nonetheless. Would it make more sense to be clean halfway through the day or at the beginning of such? So would it make more sense if you were clean halfway through a day or if you were clean at the beginning of a day? Again, this is not conclusive on its own, but edifying for the discussion. This is an interesting one. Thus saith Yahweh Eloheinu, the gate of the inner court that looks toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days. So this is the foundation of what we're getting ready to talk about. So he's telling you here that the gate should be shut for 6 working days, and I believe that this is a 24-hour day period. But on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and in the day of the new moon it shall be opened, and the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate, and the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go forth, but the gate shall not be shut until evening. Ezekiel 46:1-2. So why would the gate be shut at evening? If the evening didn't start the new day or the next day, then we would have a 12-hour discrepancy. Think about it. If the gate was to be shut for 6 days, but opened for a whole day for the Sabbath, and likewise for a new moon day, if the day began at sunrise, then shutting it at evening would cut into half a day and render this verse incorrect, as it wouldn't be shut 6 days. It would be 5.5 or 6.5, depending on when exactly it would be shut. Hope that makes sense. Go back and read that verse for yourself slowly a couple times. It'll make sense. It So now this is a commandment for paying your laborer. Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in the land within thy gates. At his day, this is an interesting translation. We're going to read another translation in a second. At his day, thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it. For he is poor and sets his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto Yahweh and be sin unto thee. So Deuteronomy 24, 14 through 15. So here we see that pay is commanded to be given the same day, not letting the sun go down upon it. Here is the interlinear, and this is a clickable link if you want to read it as an article. Deuteronomy 24:15. So it says here, Beyom. So each day. So instead of at his day, it's more correctly, each day you shall give him his wages and not let the sun go down upon it. So per this verse, if the sun went down before you paid your worker, you missed the commandment to pay him the same day. Let's look at burial. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree. But thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed of Elohim, that thy land be not defiled, which Yahweh thy Elohim gives you for an inheritance. Deuteronomy 21, 22 through 23. One who is put to death must be buried that same day. They cannot be upon the tree when the nighttime comes. Here is that commanded action. And Yahusha, this is Joshua, burnt Ai, and made it in heap forever, even a desolation unto this day. And the king of Ai he hanged on a tree until eventide. And as soon as the sun went down, Yahusha, Joshua, commanded that they should take his carcass down from the tree and cast it at the entering of the gate of the city, and raise thereon a great heap of stones that remains unto this day. And here's the crucifixion, or the death of Messiah Yahusha. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the stake on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away. So notice, this is John 19:31. So notice he was on the stake on the preparation day. So he wasn't on the stake on the Sabbath day. He was on the stake on the preparation day. So this was the day of the 14th. This is the preparation of the lamb, and the lamb was to be killed at evening. So notice he was on the stake on the preparation day, and they wanted to get him off before the Sabbath started. During the crucifixion scene in the Matthew account, it is confirmed that it was done in the daylight hours leading up to the evening. So Matthew 27:45. So now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour, and there was darkness because there was a eclipse, but it wasn't a normal eclipse, because a normal eclipse only lasts like 8 minutes, but this lasted 3 hours. But it's saying this is the 6th hour of the day and the 9th hour of the day, but there was darkness, and that's why it was noted, because it was special that there was darkness during the daytime for 3 hours. So again, just to recap, Yahusha's body was on the tree, or the stake, whatever you want to call it, on the 14th day of the month, and before it became evening, they wanted to take him down before the Sabbath, right? So let me read that again. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the stake on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was a high day. So they were trying to get him down before sunset so that he would not be upon the stake or the cross, whatever you want to call it, during the nighttime hours when the Sabbath started. Let's talk about Judaism. In testing the morning-to-morning theory, I heard much accusation laid upon the false religion of Judaism. I know. I grew up in it, so I know there's a ton of false doctrines in there. I totally get it. So they laid a lot of accusation upon the false religion of Judaism, and rightly so. This false way is filled with man-made traditions, the very same that Yahusha came and rebuked, and it's only grown worse since. There's just a ton more, even more man-made traditions now than there was 2,000 years ago. However, Judaism is used as a straw man in this debate. This is their argument. Quoting. I shouldn't have actually done quotes, because this is more like paraphrasing what they're saying. So forgive me. Judaism is false, therefore everything they observe must be then wrong. So everything that they do, we got to throw out. A lot of their practices, I agree, but we have to test each one per the scriptures, and not just throw everything away just because, well, they do it that way, so therefore we can't do it that way. So bear with me for a second. So let's let's spitball for a second. So the Jews, they observe Sabbath. Do we therefore toss out the Sabbaths, right? So like, that's what Christianity does. The Jews observe the Sabbath. We do the first day of the week because, such and such. So I'm asking you in general, because the Jews observe the Sabbath day, should we no longer observe the Sabbath day because they do so? Hardly so. They read from the Torah, not as much as their man-made books, but they read from the Torah. Should we disregard reading the Torah then? Nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. So Messiah Yahusha rebuked the Pharisees. So what I'm saying is, just because the Jews celebrate evening to evening doesn't make it wrong just because they do it. That's all I'm saying. That is what I was trying to paint the picture is, just because they observe Sabbath doesn't mean we don't observe Sabbath anymore. Just because they read from the Torah doesn't mean we don't read from the Torah. Just because they observe evening to evening doesn't automatically mean we don't observe evening to evening. Certainly we should test it, just like everything else. Just like, we should test a lot of their traditions. Like we talked about, if you joined us on the Passover study, we should test the Seder plate. The Jews, they celebrate Passover. Therefore we mean we don't celebrate Passover anymore? No. But within Passover, they keep the Seder plate, which is not Scripture at all. So we test the Seder plate versus the Scripture, and we find it false. So here what we're doing is we're testing evening to evening to see if what they're doing is true or false. In this case, I believe the evening to evening is true. So continue to bear with me, please. So Messiah Yahusha rebuked the Pharisees and Sadducees for many reasons. You won't, however, find one fault in them keeping the wrong Sabbath. Also, you won't find him rebuking them for keeping the wrong calendar dates either. In fact, Yahusha always agreed that the Sabbath they were keeping was correct. He would heal on the Sabbath day just to show them that it was lawful to do well on this holy day. He never once corrected them for keeping the wrong calendar. He never said, I'm healing on this day, which isn't even my father's true Shabbat, or something like that. He never said anything like that. Nothing, not a whisper. Josephus is a well-known first-century historian who documented the Sabbath keeping of his day as such. This was roughly the same time period as the time of Messiah. What we are about to read is not Scripture. I'm with you. And I don't lean on historical writings, but I just wanted to share this as it corroborates evidence found in the Word, everything we've been going over. And the last was erected above the top of Pastaphoria, where one of the priests stood, of course, and gave a signal beforehand with a trumpet at the beginning of every seventh day in the evening twilight, as also at the evening when that day was finished, as giving notice to the people when they were to stop work and when they were to go to work again. And it's a good time for street sweepers. Again, this is Josephus. This is the War of the Jews, 582. So this is how Shabbat was celebrated during the time of Yahusha, and he never said a word about it being false. Here's just one of the many examples of what he did on the Sabbath, and agreeing then that it was the Sabbath. If a man on the Sabbath day receives circumcision, that the law of Moshe should not be broken, are you angry at me because I have made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day? So he agreed. They rebuked him for healing on the Sabbath day, and he agreed, I made him whole on the Sabbath day. So he corroborated that what they were celebrating at that time was the correct Sabbath. John 7:23 was what we just read. So let's move to the Hebrew word erev, evening. Earlier, we briefly mentioned that evening is not the same as night. They are different. Evening is the mixing or the mingling of daytime and nighttime. It's a stitching together, if you will, of light and night, or daytime and nighttime. The evening is the stitching of the two. The word Arab, Ayin Resh Beit, is identified by Strong's under several different numbers. And like I've said before, Strong's isn't the end-all be-all, but it's a really good study tool that we can use to test things. So let's take a look. And as if you go back as a real article, you can click on these and to go to each Strong's. So you'll see this is Arab, Ayin Resh Beit. And so here you see the first one is Strong's 6153, which is Arab. And it's, of course, translated as evening, night, mingled, right? People. So the evening, night, sunset, evening, sunset, night. Here's Zechariah 14:7. But it shall be one day which shall be known to Yahweh, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. Now here's another example, Jeremiah 50:37. A sword is upon their horses and upon their chariots, upon all the mingled people. This is the same word, Arab. The mingled people that are in the midst of her, and they shall become as women. A sword is upon her treasures, as they shall be robbed. So different ways of translating this word. Here's H6151, and you'll see here. This is more properly pronounced as Arab. This is where you get Arab, in which the Arabs are a mixed people. If you remember, if you were with us in the Torah portions, the Arabs came from Abraham, mixing of the Israelites and the Egyptians. That was the mingled people. So Arab here you can see is to mix, to join together. And this Arab you'll see is actually the same. It's the same Hebrew word. To mix, to join together, mixed. So here's an example, Daniel 2:43. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, this is Arab, right? Mixed themselves with the seed of men, they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Here's H6154. This is the same thing. So Arab, right? Arab. And it is as mixed, interwoven, knitted, mixture. So again, what we're getting at here is the evening is a stitching together of nighttime or daytime and evening time mixing together. And what I'm here to propose is that this is the stitching together of one day to the next day, one calendar day to the next day. H6148. Again, you can see this is the same Hebrew word, more properly pronounced as Arab. And this is to meddle, to mingle, to pledge, exchange, engage, occupy, undertake, give pledges, or become surety, take pledge. So exchange, right? And so this is kind of what we're getting at here is to exchange. It's exchanging one calendar day for another. To braid, to intermix, to meddle with, to mingle self, to shake hands, right? And so evening is the mingling of one calendar day to the other, in my opinion. And so thank you, Brother Tobiah, for sharing this with me. This is something that was shared with me with a brother just very recently. So thanks, Brother Tobiah, for adding this to the study. So let's look at another subtopic. So Enoch, the beginning of the end of a month. So this is Enoch 77, starting at verse 12. And on the first day she is called the new moon, for on that day light rises upon her. She becomes full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west. And from the east she rises at night, and the moon shines the whole night through till the sun rises over against her, and the moon is seen over against the sun. On the west, whence the light of the moon comes forth, there again she wanes till all the light vanishes, and all the days of the month are at an end, and her circumference is empty, void of light. So a lot just happened there. So if the month begins with the first phase of the moon, the sighted sliver, so again, let me read that really carefully. So, and on the first day, she is called the new moon, for on that day light rises upon her. So now what we're talking about, this is not a perfect representation. The sun should be a little bit more of a sunset, and this is actually a little bit more of a sliver. But so if he's saying that the time when the light rises upon the moon, this is the very first visible sliver, if that starts the new month, and that is the first day, well, what time did that happen? It happened at evening. If you've ever spotted a new moon sliver, you'll know it happens at evening time, at sunset, when the sun is rising. And the sun doesn't have to be all the way at the end. It doesn't have to be exactly nighttime. You can catch it right there, right before nighttime. So what I'm proposing here is, if the month begins with the first phase of the moon, the sighted sliver, when does that come? It comes at evening, which Enoch calls the first day. Likewise, Enoch also lets us know that the month ends with the empty moon, the blank, or the conjunction moon, and that's when the month is at an end. So if a new month and a new day would start when the light rises upon the moon, it's telling you right there that the new day and the new month starts at evening. So let's go over a handful of the verses that are used for sunrise to sunrise, because again, I totally get it. When I was searching for the truth on this matter, you look at some of these verses and you're like, well, see, it says right there, the next day is the morning. And you're like, it's right there. It's plain as day, right? So hang on. But I think we have a language issue here. Not saying you have a language issue. I'm just saying I think language and translations, I think, have led some people to believe this. Let me explain. So there are many verses that may seem to imply the next 24-hour period starts at morning. And this is why many have gone to this type of timekeeping / Sabbath observance. And again, I get it. I've been speaking with brothers behind the scenes about this for a while, and I've understood their reasonings. I really have. I really, really have. But let's take a look at an example. So let's take a look at Jonah 4:6-7. And Yahweh Elohim prepared a gourd and made it to come up over Jonah so that it might be a shadow over his head. So obviously it's daytime, the sun's up, to deliver him from his grief. So Jonah was exceeding glad of the gourd, but Elohim prepared a worm when the morning rose the next day, and it smote the gourd that it withered. So like, boom, there it is. See, the morning is the next day, right? And that's what it seems to imply. And totally bearing with you because it totally sounds that way. But let's pause for a second. Let's reason with one another for a second. So this is one of many verses like it. There's a lot, and I'm not going to show. There's probably 30 that I could show you that are like this, and you're like, I get it. So if you stack them all together, you're like, well, next day. This is one of many verses like it. It seems to say that that the next day started at morning, but let's pause for a moment. Do we know what time it is when the gourd came up? Well, actually, we do, because it said it was giving him a shadow, right? So it was sun. It was at least during the daytime. So if it were afternoon and the gourd came up, but then in the morning the next day, would be true for either stance. Think about it. So if it's let's just call it noontime, right? And the gourd comes up, it's shadowing me, but then morning comes and it goes away. That's the next day for either perspective. For me, as evening to evening, if it's noontime and then evening comes, well, the next day started, right? So the morning is still the next day for me. That verse is true. For morning to morning, it's true as well. Your morning starts, that next day starts the morning, mine started at evening. But either way, that makes this verse true. So I read all this. So I read all this, so I don't have to. So it makes this verse subjective and up for interpretation. So this is a subjective verse. This is not a concrete foundation for when a day begins. And I believe, and again, what I showed you in the feast days is the concrete ground that I'm standing on. Verses like these, I think they're shaky ground because, not saying that there's anything wrong with the verse, but it's shaky ground to stand on a verse like this and say, like, see, the next day is the morning because it says so right there. It's from the perspective of where we were, where Jonah was, it's very subjective. But let's go even further. I think much of the confusion comes with the Hebrew word mahorat, which is morrow. In our modern day speech, tomorrow makes us think that the next calendar day. So like if I say, hey, yeah, I'll meet up with you tomorrow. You're like, okay, the next day. But that's not really what morrow means. Tomorrow is speaking of the next daylight, just as if I were to say tonight. So you have tomorrow, tonight. So right now, I can say tonight I can meet up with you. In our current in the calendar that we grew up in, Gregorian calendar, okay, we're fleeing that, but I'm just saying, like, when the Gregorian calendar, the day changes at midnight. So if I were to say, hey, I'll meet you tonight, right? That means I'm going to meet you when the nighttime comes. If I were to meet you tomorrow, right, I'm meeting you on the morrow. What is the morrow? Tomorrow is speaking of the next daylight. So here's the dictionary for morrow, and the archaic meaning is morning, and of course it's evolved into the next day, the time immediately after a specified event. So this is morrow. So, and the archaic, the older language, morrow was well known as morning. Over time, the language has changed this into signifying the next calendar day. This is the root of the problem with the defense of morning-to-morning thinking. There is a Hebrew word for morning, which is boker, but I believe the use of mahorat, morrow, implies morning to come, or the next period of sunlight. Let's look at a few more examples when morrow is used. I'll be putting morning next to it for a visual to see if this makes sense. This is not adding to the word. I'm just showing you a visual example of how I'm seeing this at this time. Come, let us make our father. This is another very famous example of showing you the next day is that morning, or the next calendar day. Because remember, day, yom, can mean the next. Yom can mean 12-hour daylight period or 24-hour day. And I also think some of the mix-up comes with that. So when it says the next yom, it could be the next sunlight. It doesn't have to necessarily mean the next 24-hour period day. So come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow, we'll call it the morning, that the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. So that's Genesis 19:32-34. So morrow means morning, and this passage corroborates. So newer translations have, for the most part, replaced morrow with the next day, making it even more confusing. So here's that same passage. So Genesis 19:34. So the next day, the older daughter said to the younger, Last night I slept with my father. So they replaced morrow with next day. Here's the ESV. The next day, the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. The Berean Study Bible. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger, so such and such. So, and of course, in the KJV, and it came to pass on the morrow, which the morrow is the right translation of mahorat. So, again, I think modern day translations have made it even more difficult to understand and made it more plain. Because again, when you read this, you're like, hey, the next day, boom, it's right there. Adam, what else is there to talk about? The next day started in the morning. So, but unfortunately, that's not the case, because I think the confusion lies with morrow. And when Aharon saw it, he built an altar before it and made proclamation and said, Tomorrow, or in the morning, is a feast to Yahweh. And they rose up early on the morrow, the morning, and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. So Exodus 32:5-6. So what did Aaron say? He said, tomorrow, or in the morning, will be a feast to Yahweh. And they rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings. So what this doesn't say is the next calendar day is a feast to Yahweh. Then they rose up in the morning on the next calendar day. It doesn't say that. It simply says in the morning will be a feast to Yahweh. Then they rose up in the morning, and well, you know the rest, and it wasn't good. So there's I didn't even think about it. That's an example of celebrating a feast to Yahweh, which is unauthorized. Think about that for a moment. Actually, I didn't even think about that till just now. This is an unauthorized worship of Yahweh, and it just so happens that they did it in the morning time and not evening to evening. So something to chew on. There are many more examples, and seriously, there's a ton. There really are. There's like 30 of them where you can just like boom, 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 the next day, the morrow, and you're just like, see, it's right there. But again, I'm here to tell you, morrow means the next daylight period, or the morning, the next morning. It doesn't mean the next calendar day, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion lies. And I know a lot of you have gone to morning to morning. So if you're still here with me, then you're actually probably here to test it. Most people that aren't wanting to test what they currently hold, because it's like, most of us started out in evening to evening, and then we heard a couple teachings of morning to morning. You're like, boom, I'm gone. See ya, Jews. See ya. I'm not going to do it the way you do it anymore. And when you do that, some people aren't willing to go back and be like, wait a minute, did I leave evening to evening hastily? Should I have done that? It's like, now I've got the truth, and I'm not going to look at anything else. And there's some of you I love very much, and I can say how passionate you are about morning to morning. I was watching some other studies, live streams, and I see how passionate morning to morning people can be. And I really hope that you test these things. Maybe go back and review it again for your own for yourself. Because I get where you are. I totally do. And I can totally understand. I was thinking about going there myself. I was really testing it, but continued to test it and found that would have been really hasty of me to do, and continue to find that evening to evening is the truth. And of course, I've laid out my my evidence. We've got one more thing. So there are many more examples we could go over. And again, there's like 30 of them, easy. And they will all imply that something happened in the morning. Intriguing, but not conclusive, nor does it override the clear commandments we showed according to the feast days. That's the solid ground I stand on. First Adam and Eve. I say this for last, as I know not all of you will hold this book as scripture, and that's okay. You want to stop here? I think enough evidence has been laid out for you. So if you want to stop here, I think ample evidence has been put forth. If you'd like to proceed, here's an excerpt from the first book of Adam and Eve telling the story of what actually happened when they left the garden. What you'll see is when they left, it was night. But in my mercy, this is the word of Yahweh speaking to Adam and Eve. So, but in my mercy, I have made thee as you are. When you did transgress my commandment, O Adam, I drove thee from the garden and made thee come forth into this land, and commanded you to dwell in this cave. And darkness came upon thee, as it did upon him who transgressed my commandment. It was talking about Satan earlier, who was turned into darkness. Thus, O Adam, has this night deceived thee? It is not to last forever, but is only of 12 hours. When it is over, daylight will return. Sigh not therefore, neither be moved, and say not in thy heart that this darkness is long and drags on wearily, and say not in thy heart that I plague thee with it. Strengthen thy heart, and be not afraid. This darkness is not a punishment, but, O Adam, I have made the day, and have placed the sun in it to give light, in order that you and thy children should do your work. For I knew that you should sin and transgress, and come out into this land. Yet I would not force thee, nor be hurt upon thee, nor shut up, nor doom thee through thy fall, nor through thy coming out from light into darkness, nor yet through thy coining from the garden into this land. For I made thee of the light, and I willed to bring out children of light from thee, and like unto thee. But thou didst not keep one day my commandment until I had finished the creation and blessed everything in it. Then I commanded you concerning the tree, that you should not eat thereof. Yet I knew that Satan, who deceived himself, would also deceive you. So I made known to thee by the means of the tree not to come near him, and I told thee not to eat of the fruit thereof, nor to taste of it, nor yet to sit under it, nor to yield to it. Had I not been and spoken to thee, O Adam, concerning the tree, and had I left thee without a commandment, and thou hast sinned, it would have been offense on my part, for not have given thee any order. Thou wouldst turn around and blame me for it. So this is actually really important. So even more important than them coming out in evening time or nighttime. This is actually really important. This is a really important concept to grasp. But I commanded thee and warned thee that thou didst fall, so that my creatures cannot blame me, but the blame rests on them alone. Did you catch that? Let me read that again. Had I not been and spoken to thee, O Adam, concerning the tree, and had I left thee without a commandment, and thou hast sinned, it would have been an offense on my part. So he's saying that if I didn't leave you a clear command to keep, it would have been an offense on my part for not having given thee any order. Thou wouldst turn around and blame me for it. But I commanded thee and warned thee, and thou didst fall, so that my creatures cannot blame me, but the blame rests on them alone. Why? Because he gave a commandment and it gave an example of how to do it. It's the same thing we're seeing here. I'm not saying that keeping morning to morning is sin. All I'm saying is that, you can't say he didn't tell you, because he told you how to keep his Sabbaths. He gave you an example with his feast days. He showed you evening to evening. He never once told you morning to morning. And O Adam, I have made the day for thee and for thy children after thee, for them to work and toil therein. I have made the night for them to rest in it from their work, and for the beasts of the field to go forth by night and seek their food. But little of darkness now remains, O Adam, and daylight will soon appear. And that's 1 Adam and Eve 13:9-21. So if this book is true, they left the garden, they left the light of the garden and entered into this world at nighttime. A 12-hour period of darkness, then daytime came. Also told Adam he gave him commandments so that he cannot be blamed. Remember, he gave us a clear commandment of keeping his feasts evening to evening. This is done by a just Elohim. He never told you to keep anything morning to morning. Only man has. Remember that. I'll end with this. Yahweh was clear in his commandments through his feast days how to celebrate his Sabbaths and likewise count a scriptural day. The two witnesses being the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Day of Atonement. They are both calculated from evening to evening and left for an example for us, not as confusion for us to assume that everything else is morning to morning. The fact is, we serve a straightforward Elohim. If he wanted us to observe anything from morning to morning, he would have told us and not obscured it. While prophecy and parables can be veiled or difficult to understand, keeping his commandments are not. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a just judge. Regardless of where you are in your understanding, again, I love you because you want to keep his commandments and bear fruit through Messiah Yahushua, his son. We are family, and I truly mean it. I hope this study edified you, and may he be glorified abundantly through our desires to serve him properly. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. So that ends the study, brothers and sisters. I pray that you may have got something out of it. I pray that it did not disturb you or make you upset. Again, I only do this for the edification and for us growing together. So love you very much, and let's just pray one more time as we end this. So, Heavenly Father, O Yahweh, we thank you for your word, and we thank you for leaving examples for us to follow. I pray that this study was a blessing for you, that people would want to come and learn how to keep your ways the right way, and I pray that eyes and ears be opened to what was said today. In Yahushua's name, we bless you, and we praise you, and send a multitude of hallelujahs your way. Amen and amen. Brothers and sisters, thanks for joining me, and look forward to seeing you in part 3 of the next series of our calendar study. So, shalom.